graduated, elevated. Now it's my time to shine. Yeah, let's go. Major moves, power moves.
Hello and welcome to Ph.D. Hard Talk. Thank you so much, Dr. Sanele Gamede. Could you please introduce yourself, your research, where you are, and then we can take it from there.
Thank you so much, my sister, for having me. I am Dr. Sanele. It doesn't feel well to say Dr. Sanele. It's still new. I'm so excited. I'm Dr. Sanele Gamede from South Africa. Besides being a lecturer, I am a strategic youth life and a career coach. I do educational motivational speaking as well. I'm an author of 6 exciting books, wow. But 3 are published, 3 are not yet published. They are still coming up. I do a lot of live skills training through my organization as well, but I'm also an academic, and a researcher, a lecturer in the media and journalism space.
Wow. I feel like ill-equipped for this conversation. Like, wow. Can we just take a moment and just, thank you. So much there. It's just, wow, I'm excited for this conversation. So in terms of your research then, for you to become doctor, there is a topic that you've been looking at for the past few years. Yeah. What is that topic? Could you just touch on it and then we can crack on with the questions?
Okay. I was looking at the public participation on SABC radio stations. Okay. SABC is the South African Broadcasting Corporation. So I was looking at the public participation there, and my case study was based on 2 SABC radio stations. I think the SABC has got something like 16 radio stations, if I remember very well. So I picked one of the biggest radio stations, 2 of them. So one of them being Ukhozi FM, which has over 7 million listeners. And the other one is SAfm, which falls under the SABC as well. It's a very great talk radio, or it has got great talk shows, but it's more on news as well and kind of interactive talking. So I was really interested in unpacking the issue of public participation, because we have moved from what radio was back in the days, where you could actually just wish you could meet the radio presenter. You know, you were excited to actually meet the radio presenter, but we have moved to radio being so interactive and, you know, having a lot of the public being involved in the programming, in the shaping of the show, in the interaction. So I was investigating the extent of public participation and looking at whether there is public participation in these radio stations owned by the SABC, and, you know, looking at how do people participate in these radio stations as a public broadcaster, because the SABC is a public broadcaster. It has got TV stations and radio stations. I was looking at the extent in which it allows the public, as a public broadcaster, to be involved, or it is still that public, it's still that SABC that was, you know, owned by the apartheid government at the time, and it was used as a propaganda tool at the time. So that's basically what I was investigating.
Wow, so much there. So I'll start with the first things first. Public participation. What is the definition for this research? Because, you know, my understanding may differ from what you've been looking at. What is the definition?
Basically, when we define public participation in the case of the study that I did, is basically when the public interact during the show. It could be through phone calls, it could be through emails, SMSs, Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. It could be any kind of form of public participation through the traditional way of participation and the use of new media in interacting of the public and the presenter or the producer of that particular show.
Okay, brilliant. So
Yeah.
in your findings then, what did you find when it came to public participation?
Yeah, it was interesting to find that the SABC is indeed a public broadcaster. It allows public participation, and I did an analysis of 2 shows within the SABC. So I did a contextual study where I was analyzing the data, both from interviews that I did with the producers and the radio presenters of those 2 shows. And I had over 100 hours of both shows. So I recorded the show in a month, for 1 month, both shows. And I sat down and I analyzed what was being discussed, how many times did the public participate, and which platforms did they actually use to participate. And I realized that there was actually public participation. The public is interestingly participating, and they are involved as well in shaping some of what is going to be discussed. Sometimes they suggest what should be discussed on the next show. So I chose mostly talk shows, kind of shows, which you will expect that they will allow public participation, because I wanted to measure the public participation to see if it is there. So I used a show that it's most likely guaranteed, Noma, that you will have public participation. I also found out that as much as the public is allowed, the public is involved, but the public broadcaster, from management to producers to radio presenters, they still have some sort of control in terms of who to participate, because you can imagine how many tweets, how many Facebook comments, how many calls and messages these shows will get. But the decision to who gets to participate, either as a guest or either as a phone call or a tweet, they decide who to have. They decide when to take calls, they decide when to go to Twitter, they decide to go to Facebook. So I think there is a need, in my conclusion, there is a need for the SABC. I said that they check the balance between censorship and also, the normal production, which they have to have, because they have to sort of like check who is who, which is also dangerous for a public broadcaster, because if you now stop Noma from participating, what if Noma's idea, what if you have your own ideology and you trying to sift Noma's ideology out of the public? So it is a dangerous kind of a move, but I think it should be more of a check and balance.
Okay. I'm hearing you, and I'm thinking, going back to the talk shows, what were the topics that made people participate a lot? Because if we look at the media currently, the stories that they sell to us, they engage us, and they're still like 8 hours of our day. And I'm just curious to find out, when you were picking the talk shows, what were the subject matters that they were discussing on those days?
For the entire month, for both shows, I think what stemmed out, because these were talk shows, as I've indicated, you will find developing environmental issues, you will find political issues, you will find issues that are of public importance, such as, announcement, bringing government officials to, share information. There were also educational shows, educational topics that were there. There were also human interest kind of stories in the language of journalism, where, someone has done something great and maybe went to present a paper in the UK, and they were covered in these shows. And there were also kind of controversial topics that were also covered. So there was a huge kind of range in terms of topics that were covered. But of course, you'll get more public participation in stories that touches the public, stories such as those that are touching mostly disadvantaged people, such as, payment of grants, as we know that it was during COVID-19 when I did the data collection, where people were hit strongly by COVID, and you had issues such as politics, because, they are local elections and national elections. So there were issues of politics, and people were interested in some of those controversials. And of course, there was much participation in educational shows, but at the same time, you will get those educational topics, but you will get those topics that had sort of like human interest as well, and you'll find people participating quite a lot.
Okay, I'll get back to the educational topics because I think that's interesting. Going back to the month, then we've looked at the month, people are participating, and it's different topics that they're interesting, so hence why people are tuning in. So Ukhozi FM, who are the hosts? Because I think personality again will drive people to listen. Just out of curiosity, who was hosting the entire month?
There was a DJ, a very popular DJ called DJ Skemeza on Ukhozi FM. And of course, you'll find different people coming in because there is also Siwe Cele, who's also a radio presenter on the show during the month. So they interchange depending on what is happening. Siwe was more on the educational side of things, and DJ Skemeza, Sipombata, that's his name. You will then take the entire show after Siwe. And, there were different days, and they had different topics that they cover, and they would bring different aspects as well.
Okay, so now I'm thinking, so when we had the DJ, because I presume he's popular, I've never heard of him, but I would like to think he's a DJ, so everybody knows him. I'm really sorry, whoever you are. In that sense, so would more people participate because they know the name, they know the man, and they want to be involved with him because he has a character and he has a personality? Is that what you found? Hence why the educational section, because people don't know him that well, maybe they didn't turn up as much? What are your thoughts?
I don't think it will be much of the fact that he is popular, because he is popular because of the radio.
Okay.
If I may put it in that way. So he has all the millions of followers that he has because of the radio station that has over 7 million, over 8 million listeners. So I think people started following Ukhozi FM and the show way before DJ Skemeza even joined the radio and that show. In fact, the show didn't even belong to him. There was, at the time, there was a shift. There was someone who is well known for that show, Sithakeli Sizwe, which I think she even named that show. So I wouldn't necessarily say it was because of him, but of course it might have an influence on that. But trust me, people wanted him on either his afternoon drive or his morning drive, because he's well known for the afternoon drive, not necessarily Sithakeli Sizwe.
Okay, thank you. So I'm now looking at SAfm then. So what stood out the most from SAfm, because we've concentrated more on Ukhozi. So let's go on SA. What was
SAfm, yeah, I think it was the same thing, SAfm, and mostly SAfm is like talk show. Like you will have one song or two songs in the entire show. The show is extremely talk, and oh, you will have quite a lot of people participating as well. Although, of course, the FM with the number of listeners, they have so many public participation, and SAfm has less. I mean, the viewpoint on SAfm has less hours than Ukhozi FM. On Ukhozi FM is targeted. So the show on Ukhozi FM has got 3 hours, and the viewpoint on SAfm has got 2 hours. So you might have a squeeze kind of a show on SAfm because of the time as well. But another thing, it was a discussion, and the topics, the themes that I've mentioned with Ukhozi FM, I think they were still more or less the same themes, but you will find more of political discussions and human interest and developmental stories that are mostly on SAfm. It's quite interesting how the public on SAfm have created sort of the public sphere, which was the theory that I used, which was coined by Habermas. So it was quite interesting to find that these people kind of know each other, and they're like a family, even though they haven't met.
Excellent. So I'm thinking you've gone out and you've spent some time and, looked at the public and how we're participating when it comes to the radio, and it's COVID-19, there's high levels of unemployment. How does your research benefit the wider community?
I think for this study, it will still benefit, and I think it's very important because we are talking about a public radio station, or we are talking about a public broadcaster, which it needs to be constantly checked, because there were a lot of complaints around the issue of these public broadcasters being used as a political arena for certain political parties, and it sort of like excluded some political parties and all of that. So, and it is very important for the public broadcaster to include the public. So I think it will be interesting for someone who follows, or for someone who likes this public broadcaster, to know that the public broadcaster, it is a broadcaster for the public, and it's still a broadcaster for the public. So I think it also creates a standpoint for scholars as well to look at it in an angle of the virtual public sphere that was created by these shows when I was looking at them, which comes from the public sphere that Habermas came up with to say this is an arena where individuals from different walks of life can come together and confer in unrestricted kind of an environment. So it was quite an interesting arena as well, although it was virtual, because I mean, we are in radio. It was interesting to see that, the SABC is taking that stand of creating a public sphere.
Okay, I like your response. However, I'm thinking, so, you mentioned that prior, based on history, yeah, SABC was controlled by the politicians then, we'll put it that way. And current situation, there's rumors that, sorry.
Yes.
Current situation, there's rumors that that might be the case. So when you've gone through your analysis, what KPIs did you use to identify that that is not the case? Because what you've mentioned is they vet and they choose what subject matters should be brought on. For example, if people on Twitter are going off to say this person is doing this and is interesting, let's bring it on, or bring the crowd in, for example. Or if it's a topic that pertains to, you know, like the bursaries that you've mentioned, or electricity, water supply, etc., you know, and then we run with that because it's helping people and they can get the information there and then. It's live. So what KPIs were you setting? Because I can imagine that it was going up and down dependent on situ. How did you manage that in your research?
I think it wasn't more of what I've realized, or what I've found from the research is that it's different from what it was during the apartheid era, where the broadcaster was really owned and managed by the apartheid government at the time. Because we have social media, people can actually have a voice today. So there is no way that you can hold them, even when they have a view that is uncomfortable. You will drop that person and another person will call you on air to say, I don't think it was fair. I don't think a public broadcaster should cut someone's view. They should let, even if the view differs with you and all of that. So there is so much check and balance through the aid of new media, social media, and the internet is driving all of this. So I think it was easier back in the days to say, you know what, we are not publishing this, we are publishing this, and we can cut so and so. Yes, there are instances, they set boundaries as well to say, this is what we allow, switch off your radio, you can't insult anyone, and they will drop you when you insult anyone. But that is not a sign of sort of like censorship in my analysis. It is a sign of, you know, programming. It's part of what a public broadcaster should vet. It should make sure that whatever that is put out there is not offensive to the public. But it's true when it comes to reading comments on social media that you might have the radio presenter screening some of the comments and making sure that, you know what, I can read this one, I can't read this one, or I'm interested in this one, which is their personal preference. But when they responded during my interviews, it was more of like sometimes first come, first serve. It was more random. There was no check to like who is this and stuff like that. But when it comes to calls, they definitely check who is calling, and they make sure sometimes that this person is talking about what we are talking about before they put them on air. So those were some of the things that I used to measure their interview, or the interview that I did with them also created a clear understanding to me to some of the questions that I had around who do you choose to participate, how do you choose to participate, and how the public influence the programming and all of that. So when I sat down with them, I got some understanding as to how they do the whole thing.
Excellent. So I'm thinking of future research, because I know you have to have your recommendations. And yeah. I know there's in current situ, we have podcasts, we have YouTube channels, we have a lot that's going on. And I know there's one that's really big at the moment, and it's, which is Podcast and Chill. Do you feel, in your own opinion, that, Ukhozi FM, let me say it right, and SAfm, they are trying to compete to remain relevant because you've got individuals who've come up with something and they touch on everything and it's uncensored. Sometimes it's very personal and hard-hitting, and may be seen as offensive, but the things that they touch on is pretty much just like me going on Twitter and writing a comment. What are your thoughts on that?
I think we need to, as a radio scholar, I think a responsible thing to say will be to correct the public. Podcast and radio are two different things. They have two different mandates, or they have different mandates and stuff like that. And I think it is important for radio to consider innovative ways, such as creating podcasts of what they have recorded or what they had on air and stuff like that. But I think to compete in terms of content will kill radio while they are trying to compete. You can't, as an adult, you can't compete with a child. A child has no responsibility. A child has no filter, and they are a child. They have no responsibility to the nation and all of that. And these podcasts, they are mainly on viewers. They are mainly on pushing fame. They are mainly on one subject, particularly. They are not like radio, so we can't. We are making a big mistake if we will want radio to compete with podcasts. Radio should remain radio, and radio should be like newspapers and TV, invite new and innovative ways of doing things. But I don't see, and I don't want radio to change to be TV, and TV to change to be radio, or newspapers try to be podcasts or whatsoever. But they can include innovative ways of doing things. So I'm not intimidated as a radio scholar, and I think radio owners and people that are working on radio, they shouldn't be intimidated. People are going to listen to podcasts and they will come back to radio, because people watch podcasts and listen to podcasts mainly for pleasure, as you have said. But when we want hardcore issues, we will find them on radio. And it's also great that we also responsible in doing so, because at the same time, we come back to critique some of the episodes from the podcast, which of course the owners of the podcast are benefiting, because they grow fast and they trend, which is what they want. But I think we come back as a public to criticize some of the things, and we come back and say radio was better and stuff like that, because things are censored. I think a razor to a child is still a dangerous thing. Whether it is 2020 or it's 2065, it will still be a dangerous thing. So giving too much freedom and making sure that it's uncensored, it will kill radio, and we wouldn't be interested in listening to that, according to my own analysis.
That response, that was epic. Like, I have no response, but I will take your word for it.
Graduated, elevated, now it's my time to shine, yeah, let's go. Major moves, power moves, take it to the top one time non-stop.